Hello, and welcome to the Mental Health Attention Initiative. I'm the host for the Talk4Help podcast. In honor of Suicide Prevention Month of September, we have today a suicide prevention specialist with Miss Rachel, who will be discussing with how suicide can have a huge toll on our mental health and the importance of looking out for one another and ourselves. I hope that from listening to these responses regarding the close link between mental health and emotional health and the major impact cassettes will give you a newer perspective. Hello, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little about what you do and what your job entails and whether there is a specific age level you work with?
Yes, my name is Rachel Levy. I am the Suicide Prevention Coordinator at Jewish Family and Children's Services. I do the Signs of Suicide program in the schools in the Philadelphia district, and I work with grades age 6th through 12th grade.
Nice. How does suicide correlate with mental health?
So it's important that we take care of our mental health. Mental health is a part of all of us taking care of our mind. If somebody has poor mental health or has a mental health condition, it might lead to thoughts of suicide. Not everybody who has a mental health condition, not everyone who is depressed is suicidal. But if somebody has a mental health condition, like depression or something else, and they struggle with getting the help that they deserve, the help that they need, they might start to have feelings of suicide, having thoughts of, feelings of hopelessness and feeling of helplessness, which might lead to thoughts of suicide. But it is really important to remember that just because somebody has a mental health condition, it doesn't mean that they will specifically be suicidal. In fact, most people who have a mental health condition are in fact not suicidal.
Thank you. Next question is, are suicide rates high within the teenage age group?
So overall, the suicide rates for young adults are, or for teens, is lower than young adults. But there are high rates of suicidal ideation. There are high rates of self-harm and emergency room visits. So that's why it's really important to pay attention to this. It is indicative of there being a mental health crisis for young people. And that's why it's something that we really need to pay attention to. Suicide rates, and again, the information that we get about suicide rates is always on a little bit of a lag. But according to the CDC, in 2021, about 9% of high school students did report having attempted suicide within the past 12 months. So, that number isn't zero. So it's really important to pay attention that it is still a concerning issue. Yeah.
What could be some apparent factors of suicide?
So there are a lot of things to pay attention to when it comes to suicide, and we're all different. And that's why suicide is so complicated. It's never one single factor, and we are all different. So the way that I might deal with something is different with how you might deal with something, but things to pay attention to are changes in mood, changes in behavior. If somebody has sadness or if somebody has anger that's out of context or out of character, you want to pay attention if somebody is no longer participating in activities they used to enjoy doing. If there are changes in their eating habits, if there are changes in somebody's sleeping habits, if somebody is talking about suicide, we need to pay attention to that. We need to take that seriously. Or if somebody has a preoccupation with talking about death or talking about dying. If people are engaging in risky behaviors, if somebody is not taking care of their hygiene. So there are just a lot of different factors, and it might look differently. It doesn't mean that someone's going to have 10 factors. They might have 2.
Why do you think the rates are high among teenagers?
So again, there are a lot of different factors, and we are all different. There are the changes in our hormones, or somebody might have feelings of distress or feelings of hopelessness or helplessness. There might be increased pressure in school. We know that COVID might have been a factor, and isolation might have been a factor. Bullying can be a factor, not just someone who is being bullied, but the person who is the bully might be going through something themselves, right? So that might be manifesting, that anger might be manifesting itself in a specific way. If somebody has that pressure to succeed, if somebody has experienced a trauma or a loss of a loved one, LGBTQ plus students also have an increased risk, especially if they don't have the support of loved ones or feel like they're in a safe space. So there are a lot of different factors. Again, And another one is having access to weapons. So that's also something to make sure, like, to stay safe is to stay away from any kind of deadly weapon.
How have these rates changed within history compared to now, and is it stigmatized?
Yeah, so suicide, it used to be the second leading cause of death after accidents. It is now the third leading cause of death for young people because, unfortunately, homicide is now the second leading cause of death. Suicide rates have sort of been on this steady increase. It's plateaued, it's dipped, and it's hard to understand exactly what that trend is. But we see that suicide rates and suicidal ideation is still high, and so it's something that indicates that there is still that stigma, that there is still that fear of being judged, there's still that fear of being criticized. That's why we're having this conversation, to kind of reduce that stigma, but it is showing like these suicide rates still are on a steady increase. And there's still that stigma around talking about mental health and talking about depression and suicide.
How do you think we can approach healthy conversations about suicide?
So I think it's really important to always give people a safe space to share and to talk about our feelings. I think there's still this big myth that if you talk about suicide, then somebody is going to have thoughts of suicide, or it's going to introduce an idea into somebody's head that they weren't necessarily thinking about before. And it's in fact the opposite. Talking about suicide and talking about mental health is letting somebody know, hey, I'm not scared of having this really hard conversation with you. I'm a safe person. I want you to know that I'm here for you, and if maybe you're not ready to talk about it right now, in the future, I am someone that you can come and talk to. So, it's letting people know that we're not scared of this topic. Ways to have this conversation is you want to create a safe and open space. You could point out to someone the things that you've noticed. I've noticed changes in your behavior, or I've noticed that you aren't seeming like yourself. You want to let them know that you've noticed these signs. You don't want to come, in a judgmental way. You don't want to be dismissive of the things that they're feeling. You want to express your concern and express that you are there for them. You don't want to categorize things as saying like you're doing something bad or you're doing something wrong. You don't want to categorize things as either bad or good. You just want to say, I've noticed you haven't been hanging out like you used to, or I've noticed that you haven't been responding to my text messages, and just saying I'm worried about you, I care about you. And it's really important, like those things that we talked about of things to look out for, to take those seriously. If you notice that there's a change in your friend or your family member or your loved one, let them know that you're here, that you care about them. Even if somebody seems kind of casual about it, right? Even if somebody, when they're talking about suicide, they seem like they're joking, that might be their only way that they're talking about suicide. And so you might think like, oh, they're just kidding. But we don't want to take that chance and think someone was kidding when they really meant it. So we want to take it seriously anytime we see any kind of warning signs, even if somebody is talking about suicide, even if it seems like they're talking about it in a casual kind of way.
How can students receive help and support in the best way possible?
So I think it's important to first off think about like who your trusted adults are. Who are your trusted adults are maybe at home or like in your community? Who are your trusted adults at school? And to rely on those people to get you the help that you deserve. Friends are really important, right? Friends are the people who might notice those changes first. They might be the ones who you feel most comfortable talking to. But you want to think about like who are the support systems that can get you that extra help that you deserve. I always say if you feel like you talk to a trusted adult and they don't take you seriously or they dismiss you, adults are humans too. We all make mistakes. So find somebody else to talk to. I lost my train of thought of what the rest of your question was. I'm so sorry.
How can students receive help and support?
Right. So again, think about who your trusted adults are. Think about your support at school. At school, you have your counselors. You have your STEP team. The 988 number is the Suicide and Mental Health Crisis Line. That is a number one can call or text 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It is confidential, which means you don't have to give any personal information. It's free. It's just another fantastic resource of trained mental health professionals. I also want to point out, you all who are listening here at Palumbo are in high school, so that means when you're 14 or older, your parents or guardians do not need to be involved in your mental health care, which means you can talk to your counselor at school or your step team at school, and they can connect you with mental health resources, and you don't necessarily have to have parents or guardians even know that you're reaching out, that you're talking to someone. I know that it can be scary to talk to someone, but we all deserve to feel better. There also is, I know I'm just listing off resources, there's also a resource called Kooth. Have you all heard about it here? Yes, you've heard about Kooth. So they won't let me sign up because I'm an adult. They have an age cutoff, but it is supposed to be a free and confidential service for Philadelphia district students. So give that a try. I know they ask like a lot of questions, ask a lot of personal information. They're not going to contact, they're not going to use any of that information against you. I think it's just a way of gathering information. So I know sometimes people walk through it and they're asking too many questions. I don't want to answer, but know that it is a good resource that offers free support to students.
Thank you for that. And as we may know, September is Suicide Prevention Month. Why do you think suicide prevention is even celebrated?
So the reason we have Suicide Prevention Month is, one, as a way to remember those lives lost by suicide, those who have lost loved ones, those who have made suicide attempts, to recognize. And part of it is to also take away some of that stigma, to give that space to those who might be struggling either with the loss of the loved one or with suicidal ideation themselves. We want to bring awareness to a highly stigmatized subject, like we talked about. We want to reduce risk. We want to encourage people to talk, and I think the more that we talk about it and making a month about it and bringing this attention will hopefully encourage more people to seek help and to also feel less alone.
Thank you for that. Our final questions are, what have schools done to mend students' mental health? What have they done to cause mental health illness? And what can be changed in how schools are supposed to approach mental health?
So it's a really good question, and I think I'm hopeful that schools have sort of changed things. I think there's always been this focus on the academic and performance and showing up. And I might say this is like a good thing that's come out of COVID, which I don't know if we could really say there's a good thing that's come out of COVID, but I think there's that focus on mental health and looking at students in a really holistic way of saying, okay, come to school and do well in school, but also what's going on in the background. Let's focus on what's going on at home, what's going on in your personal lives, and saying we're not just going to say, all right, show up to school and get good grades, but we're going to focus on students as individuals and pay attention to the things that they have going on. We'll have, mental health activities, right? You had a mental health fair at the beginning of the school year, and I know you have one again, usually at the end of the school year. So just giving those spaces to talk about mental health, giving those spaces to engage with students in different grades or different activities, to not necessarily focus on the academic, but to focus on you as an individual. Again, the goal is to normalize this conversation, give space for this conversation, having people come in to talk to you all, having you feel like you have that space to talk about mental health, knowing that you have counselors and other trusted adults, right? They don't have to be your counselors or teachers if you want to, your counselors or a mental health professional at school. If you want to talk to someone, if you have a teacher or a coach, or it's the nurse or somebody at the front desk that you feel comfortable talking to, I think them being prepared to have conversations with you all and for them to know what to do if a student presents any sort of mental health concerns, to know how to handle those sort of situations, and to make sure that everyone gets the help that they deserve. So I think it's moving away. Obviously, academic is important, but moving away and paying attention to students as a whole and giving that space to focus on mental health.
Thank you so much, and that concludes our questions. Thank you so much, Ms. Rachel.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Do you have anything you want to leave for our viewers?
I think it is really important for us to talk about mental health. I want everybody to know that mental health is that depression is a real mental health condition, and that it's treatable, whether it be through taking medication, whether it be through talking to a therapist. It's really important for people to know that they are not alone in the way that they feel. And unfortunately, when somebody is depressed, it's hard to realize how much you have people around you who care about you, because you're sort of in it. And it's really important for us to know that depression or any other kind of mental health condition, it needs to be treated like you would any kind of physical condition, right? You need to take care of it. I would never tell somebody with asthma, hey, don't use your inhaler, just breathe, right? So we got to take care of our mental health in the same way. You need to see a mental health professional, right? That's not going to be your friends. Your friends are amazing, but your friends are not going to diagnose any kind of mental health condition. See a mental health professional. I know talking to a therapist might feel really uncomfortable at first. You might walk out and feel like, I feel the same, or I feel worse. It's a process. Give it time. Medication, it's not going to be like taking a Tylenol for a headache and you're going to feel better and your headache's going to go away in a day. I mean, not a day, in an hour. It's going to take time. It has to work its way through your body. But there should never be any shame in taking care of yourself, in talking about your feelings, in anything that you are going through. So I appreciate you being here, because I think some of us grow up in homes and in families and our friends where we don't talk about mental health. And us being here encourages this conversation and lets people know that there is a safe space to talk about mental health. So I really appreciate you having me and doing this for your students.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It was great having you.
Thank you.
It was great having Ms. Rachel's views and inputs on these discussion questions, as these are very personal questions regarding mental health and which can give us insight to us all. And that closes our interview from the Talk4Help podcast. Thanks to our guests today and for listening. Stay tuned for the next episode for the Talk4Help podcast, and keep your eyes open to the Mental Health Attention website and Instagram at Villa_MHA for more updates. Hope to see you again.